Okay, that's 7 o'clock. We're going to call the meeting to order. Will the clerk note those in attendance?
All will be noted.
Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jump into item 2, approval of the minutes of the regular city council meeting on December 13th, 2022. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Moving on to item 3, adoption of the agenda. We have a couple of changes. One, we have an addition, item 4I, which is a special event application for Carboni's Pizza and Pub. Again, that'll be item 4I. And then at the request of a council member, we're going to move item 4D, resolution establishing regular meeting dates of the White Bear Lake City Council, to item 8B under new business. With those two corrections to the agenda, does anyone have any additions? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adopting the agenda say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have an agenda. Item 4, consent agenda. I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We have adopted the consent agenda. Item 5, visitors and presentations. We have nothing scheduled. Item 6, public hearings. Vacation of easement at 3600 and 3646 Hoffman Road. Mr. Lindahl.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. The item before you is an easement vacation request from SRD 2.0 LLC, an affiliate of Schaefer Richardson Development Company. You may remember that they were the developers of the White Bear Lake apartment site, the second phase of that development site. The applicant has already received approvals for the redevelopment of the site into that 244-unit apartment complex. These vacations are necessary to remove 2 of the easements that serve the previous Village Stadium site and are no longer necessary and have no public purpose to them, and are also necessary just to clear the title work for the applicant to construct to redevelop the site. So both planning staff and engineering staff have reviewed it and found, again, no public purpose for the proposed easements. There's a little bit more detail in the analysis in your staff report, but with that, staff would recommend approval of this item, subject to the council conducting a public hearing tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Lindahl. At this time, I will open it up for a public hearing. I don't have anyone on my sheet. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council. Council, what would we like to do?
Move to approve.
Yeah, second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 6B, issuance of general obligation capital improvement bonds and adoption of a capital improvement plan. Ms. Kinsvater.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This was kind of a long memo, so I have some detailed things I'd like to go through as we look at this process. So the city is beginning the final step of the process to issue bonds for the renovation and expansion of the public safety facility. Just as a quick review, the city is using a combination of revenues to pay for this renovation project. There's bond issues that we are doing 2 bond issues, one in 2022 and one in 2023. We will be using interest earned on bond proceeds that we hold during the life of the project, and there will be sales tax refunds that we received on items purchased as part of the project that we will be using. So those are our revenues that we're putting together to pay for the project. As a reminder to the audience, I know the council has talked about this quite a bit, that the city council chose to divide the bond issues into 2 separate years. That is so that we can keep the annual issuance amount below the $10 million limit, which if we stay below the $10 million limit, or at or below, then banks are qualified to bid on our projects, on our bonds, which means that we will typically have more bidders and that the interest rates will be lower. So that was a decision that the council had made. That's why we have the two issues. So what we're doing now is starting the process for that second issue. We issued the one in December of 2022. This will be the second one for 2023. Just to go back, kind of as we go through this process, when we issue capital improvement bonds, there needs to be a capital improvement plan that is adopted that goes with the bond issue. So the original project financing for these activities began in December 14th, 2021. At that time, the City Council held a public hearing for the adoption of the capital improvement plan for the project to begin the process to issue the bonds. With that, the City Council authorized the issuance of the bonds after the public hearing for an amount up to $14,315,000 for the project. When the actual bids were opened in October of 2022, due to the industry uncertainty and the large cost increases, the bids came in much higher than originally anticipated. So the total project costs were $17.8 million. So as we begin to work through this process to issue these bonds, we look at the amount of the bonds that were authorized with that first CIP process, that $14 million, and we need to amend our CIP so that we have authorization to issue all of the bonds to cover the project costs. So therefore, we're holding a public hearing tonight to amend the capital improvement plan that was originally adopted in December of 2021. With this, the amendment would authorize additional bond funding of $3,765,000. When we add that to the $14,350,000, we come to the bond amount that we need of $18,080,000. So even though we're issuing the $10 million of bonds this year, we don't have to have the public hearing on all 10 million because some of that was already approved with that first CIP. So we're just amending the CIP so that it can cover all of the bond authorizations that we need. So the capital improvement plan, when it was included in the packet, there is a list of there that shows that we need that $3,765,000 for the additional expenditures for the public safety facility. In addition to those expenditures, there are other expenditures that qualify for capital improvement plan to be funded by these bonds that have been included. And by doing those projects are only listed in the event that there are any contingency funds remaining from the public safety facility project. There's a contingency built in of $715,000. And if the $715,000 is needed for the public safety facility project, none of these other projects would be done. They are just being added in case. The contingency doesn't need to be used. At that point, if the contingency isn't used, since those are part of bond proceeds, the only way that we would be able to spend those bond proceeds would be to have additional items included in your capital improvement plan. You can only spend the capital improvement bond proceeds on capital improvements that are listed in that plan. So by adding those items in, it doesn't obligate the city to do those projects, and it does not affect our bond issue amount at all. As I said, it's only providing flexibility to be able to use the bond proceeds for if there's any remaining contingency on approved projects. So if the city council chooses not to include those extra projects to use the bond proceeds for, if there were any contingencies left, that money would need to be transferred to the debt service fund, and then would be used to pay down the debt. One thing to be careful for, if we do have extra money that would be put in the debt service fund to pay down the debt, there are arbitrage rules that apply to how much money is available, because you can't be earning interest. It's a complicated calculation. We watch these arbitrage rules. So there might be some instances that we'd have to pay back some money to the IRS because of that arbitrage issue. So after I finish this presentation and the council's deliberating, there will be the public hearing to discuss that capital improvement plan. Then the city council will be asked to approve that capital improvement plan. And then part of the resolution also approves the issuance of the 2023 general obligation capital improvement bonds. So this is where the resolution covers everything at once. So we're going to approve the capital improvement plan and then give the preliminary approval to issue the bonds. So then looking at the bonds, the pre-sale schedules have been included in your documents. The schedules were built with a market rate of, I should say, with a true interest cost of 4.489%. So when we look at that, that is calculated by taking the market rate when those reports were run, was 3.73%, and then we added on a 0.75%, so 0.75, to be a cushion for any interest rate changes that happen in the market between the date that the reports were run and then the date of the actual bond sale. So there is a chance that that 4.489 is higher. We're just using that higher amount as we do these estimates. So as we look back on, when we compare it back to our other bond that we issued in December of 2022, it was at 3.75%. So we're looking at a market rate that's pretty similar. The annual tax levy to pay the debt service for these 2023 capital improvement bonds will range between $630,000 and $842,000 per year. If there's any shortfall in the payment projections, that would require the city to increase its commitment and add money to ensure that the debt obligation is satisfied. So with that, staff recommends that the City Council adopt the resolution with the following items. So that would be adopting the capital improvement plan, authorizing Ellers, our financial advisor, to assist in the 2023A general obligation capital improvement bond sale and to work with staff to prepare the necessary documents for that process. This would establish the February 28th, 2023 as the meeting for considering the bond sale proposal, and also set February 28th, 2023 as the date for awarding the bond sale. One thing I did want to note, after we have this, the public hearing and the resolution is adopted, because this is the capital improvement plan bonds, this then begins the reverse referendum process. So then that would start a 30-day period in which a petition, if it is signed by at least 5% of the voters from the November 2022 election, that can be submitted to the city clerk. If no petition is received, the city can proceed with the bond financing plan as proposed. If a petition is received, the city council will need to either hold an election on the project and have a vote, or seek alternative financing option or abandon the project. So with that, I can answer any questions that you have. We do have Dan Tentner from Ellers with us in the audience today, so if you have any specific questions that might be around the bonds or any of the process, he'll be able to answer questions too.
Thank you, Ms. Kinsvater. At this time, I will open it up for public hearing. Pretty confident no one's going to speak to this issue, but I'll do it nonetheless. I don't see anyone on my list. Going once, going twice. I'll bring it back to the council and close the public hearing. Council, what would we like to do?
Question?
Sure. Councilmember Walsh.
Mr. Mayor, just on the list of projects that you were talking about, just a kind of a paperwork thing, but so the resolution we pass in the third whereas references it, right? So including but not limited to finance additional costs, renovation, finance improvements to City Hall, parentheses, the projects. So we reference this list of projects, right? But they're not really anywhere else except in the memo. So is that good enough? I mean, I assume it's good enough, but it's not really in the resolution anywhere. So if you look back in 10 years or in 5 years or next month, the list of projects is in the memo we got. Is that enough? Or is there something else I'm missing, like a CIP list that is officially passed somewhere? Is that where I'm getting at?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, there is the 5-year capital improvement plan that was part of your packet, and that's where that details exactly what the projects are and their costs.
And we have previously, or is it just, that's our rolling 5-year plan? So I'm just trying to tie it all together. So somebody could tie that, find that through our actions. It's not just a list that it's in a memo somewhere.
Mayor, members of the council, the second whereas references the capital improvement plan, and the projects are related to the capital improvement plan, which is that document
Okay.
that Ms. Kinsvater is referring to.
Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Kinsvater, with regard to the list of possible uses for available contingency funds found on page 3 of the memo, if we have contingency, does that, the decision about which of these projects, does that have to come back to the council for approval? I'm looking at the items. I personally think I would have some priorities for which items are of greater importance than others, but who gets to make those decisions according to our process here?
Mayor and members of the council, that would be the city council. Those items were taken directly out of the city's capital improvement, our 10-year capital improvement plan, and we took out items that were that fit into the qualification that could be a capital paid by those capital improvement plan bonds, but that would be the council's decision.
So the fact that they're listed here simply makes them fair game for us to decide and that if we do have contingency available to us, goes unspent, we would then, you would bring back recommendations on how we would allocate that contingency among these kinds of projects.
That is correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anyone else on the council?
Move to approve.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries and the resolution passes. All right, moving on to item 7, unfinished business. We have a second reading, development review process zoning ordinance text amendment. Mr. Lindahl.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. This is the second reading of a zoning ordinance text amendment related to the development review process that the city offers, specifically including the items that would have processes for neighborhood meetings and concept plan review. Just by way of quick background for anyone that may be watching at home or part of the audience, this process originated from goals in the comprehensive plan and the city's housing study. And the council asked staff to work on these issues, and we brought you this item for discussion back to the Planning Commission back in October of last year and to the City Council on November 8th, and was directed to prepare an ordinance, which is what's before you tonight. The Planning Commission reviewed this item and held a public hearing on it back on November 28th and received no comments. The City Council held the first reading on December 13th. At that time, the council approved the first reading and had some questions or comments about how the neighborhood meeting process could impact individual residential applications that could come forward for certain conditional use permits. We talked about that during the last meeting, and I'll give you a follow-up here about that in a minute. But at this point, both the Planning Commission and staff are recommending approval of the ordinance as it's before you tonight. So some notes from about the ordinance for the second reading that's before you tonight. In relation to those residential CUPs, and this council's concerned about how the neighborhood meeting could affect smaller items that individual residential property owners could have. We looked at the overall list of conditional uses that could apply to those residential districts, talked about those last month, narrowed them down to 4 at that point that included daycares, home occupations, the authorization of a second curb cut or driveway access on a residential property, and then earth-sheltered homes. And agreed that those could be exempt from the neighborhood meeting process, meaning that those applicants for those applications wouldn't be required to host a neighborhood meeting for their neighbors around them for these applications. Since the first reading, the staff has, reviewed this list again and noted that also home accessory apartments, or what are thought of as accessory dwelling units or ADUs, are also residential conditional uses. So staff is recommending including that as a 5th item that would be exempt from that neighborhood meeting process. I think it's important to note that in each situation, these are conditional uses that would require the applicant to come forward with a public hearing and notice of that public hearing to their surrounding neighbors, have that public hearing with the Planning Commission review, and then subsequent review and approval by the council. So while this is exempting those uses for individual homeowners to host their own neighborhood meeting, it still includes a public process that would inform the surrounding neighbors of this happening. And then the second item staff wanted to note as part of an addition to the second reading ordinance before you tonight, just as kind of a technical matter here, we've added to Article 2, which is needed to avoid some potential, what could be potential conflicts in the term concept, because we're labeling concept plan process in this actual ordinance tonight. The PUD, or plan unit development process, has 3 stages: a concept stage, a development stage, and a final stage. So to avoid any perceived confusion between these 2 processes, we're just eliminating the term concept from the planned unit development regulations. So it's a technical matter, it's a housekeeping kind of thing. Staff does feel that this will create clearer language for us to use when we're talking with people about this ordinance. With that, there's detailed information in your packet about the ordinances that we're proposing here, processes we're proposing here tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions. This is really from the discussion item to the first reading to tonight, the third time that the council has a chance to review this, and we've had a public hearing, and the public has a chance to comment with the Planning Commission too. While tonight isn't a public hearing, I would just also offer for you that we did receive some comments by email to this afternoon that you did all receive in your email, but paper copy was provided to you tonight, supporting staff's recommendation to include accessory dwelling units as being exempt from that, the neighborhood meeting requirement. So with that, I'm happy to go through any portion of the ordinance that the council may have questions on, or look for you to move approval of this item.
Thank you, Mr. Lindahl. I'll just offer my initial comments. Subsection 1, purpose of intent, I think sums it up. It's the city's intent to expand and enhance the dissemination of information to the residents and to encourage greater involvement by the community in the planning process. That's certainly what I've heard from residents, what other projects that have been before the city in the past, and I think this makes great strides in doing just that. It is an opportunity for early in the process for the community to be involved and, quite frankly, give would-be developers a chance to feel out whether or not there's actually a viable project to be had. So I see this as a win-win all around. I think it accomplishes what what the council's goals were that we had discussed in previous work sessions. So I would support this ordinance. I do have one housekeeping matter on the ordinance, which is found in subdivision 5B on page 3. We still have Park Advisory Commission as one of the commissions that will receive a notice or schedule meeting dates for the Planning Commission, Park Advisory Commission, and City Council. So would want to strike that language because it has no application in this ordinance. But other than that, I think it looks good, and I would recommend the council to adopt this ordinance. So with that, council, do we have questions for Mr. Lindahl, or what would we like to do? Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we would strike the Parks Commission even if we were trying to build an earth-sheltered building in one of our parks?
We would indeed, yeah.
I see, okay, fine. Two topics.
Accessory dwelling unit attached to it.
I'd like to see what that one looks like. So two topics, and I raised them at our last council meeting. Mayor, I completely agree with your drawing emphasis to subdivision 1. We're trying to engage and inform and engage citizens in conversations around development in their neighborhoods. Totally on board with that and echo your comments. Mr. Lindahl, we had some conversation about required distances, who must be notified about various kinds of developments. And my take home from the last council meeting where that was discussed is that we are talking about mostly voluntary, well, they're part of our process, so they're not voluntary in that regard, but developers are they have this opportunity to speak in the community, to the community about projects. Would you clarify for me again the minimum state requirement for who must be noticed, and address any thoughts that have occurred since our last discussion about what that proper distancing ought to be?
Mayor, members of the council, thank you for that question. The statutory requirement for public hearing notifications is 350 feet. As a practical matter, staff currently has the practice, which is common amongst the planning field, to look at where that 350 feet lies and include adjacent properties as in addition to that as makes sense. So if the 350 feet touches 2 or 3 houses on a block, it seems to make sense that we include the whole block. So it's at least 350 feet for that public hearing requirement. It is the practice of this ordinance to carry that standard forward in this case. So it notes that the invitation list would be provided by the city using that same public hearing notice practice.
Okay. So I would propose for our council conversation, if nobody else is interested, I get it, I'm the only one interested. I've lived through 2 of those processes where we used 350 feet, and it was grossly, thoroughly, tumultuously inadequate for the noticing that was done at 2 locations on County Road E. And there was visible, tangible anger. Mr. Jones, you might be the only member that was present for any of that, but I might be wrong. That folks said, why did I not receive a notice? And because they're 2 blocks away, but these are big projects on multiple acres. The Level Up Academy site is 4 to 5 acres. And so its footprint is very large. 350 feet from a 5-acre parcel for development is inadequate, in my opinion, for formal noticing. So to the extent that we are choosing to only stay with a state minimum, I think that is inadequate to achieve our purpose, our stated purpose of informing and engaging the community in items that affect them. Now, I don't want to make anybody's life more miserable than it needs to be, but I suggest that in large projects, 350 is the wrong radius, the wrong distance to use to accomplish our stated purpose. And I value some conversation about, are there certain kinds of projects that are of certain size or whatever that would require and merit a larger, and since we're the ones providing the list, we can't hold the developer accountable for having having outreach if we don't give them a robust list. So that is that's in my mind a place where greater attention is needed. I would thoroughly agree that in smaller properties, 350 might be exactly the right distance. But these other larger venues, and we only have a handful of them remaining in the city, but we do have a handful, and I just don't want to have to live through another ones besides the two that I've already lived through. I lost hair over them. So that's item one. Mr. Mayor, if I can raise a second topic?
Please.
So the second piece is that we enact our ordinances. There is a completely valid purpose in helping developers understand local dynamics, the suitability of ideas that they might wish to propose, and for them to make business decisions about items that they may or may not want to pursue. Totally get that, and I totally support that idea. I suggest that a second purpose of our ordinances is that we actually empower our citizens to know how to use our regulatory process to defend and support their interests in development. And that our job is always a balancing. There's always a sense of, yes, we have somebody choosing to invest in our community to bring a different type of housing, a different kind of business, whatever, and often that is good. And then there are changes in the dynamics of the local neighborhood that others may view as not so good. And so we're always trying to balance while honoring property rights and all that other stuff. The point that I'm trying to make is we have done, in my opinion, a god-awful job as a city in empowering our citizens on how to understand the development process, on how to, and any tools on how to use it. We are not necessarily so bad with developers, okay? Folks who have money who want to invest, that's a good thing, and we want to, I'm not trying to say that we shut that off, but I'm also saying we don't empower our citizens on how to, where in this process do they have leverage? What are the kinds of times and places where they need to be paying particular attention? And we don't provide any education. We have been to the point, and maybe this is changing, and so, Mr. Lindahl, a question that I'm going to throw you in just another moment, is this sense of, okay, so we're going to have a process. Do we have educational support? Do we have the use of our website? Is it going to be consistent so that an average citizen who doesn't read this stuff for a living can read it and say, this is where, these are the things that I need to pay attention to. These are the things I can do. These are the points where I have leverage. And will it be in writing? Because all of our previous issues, we are always starting with a verbal explanation that says, we're just at the beginning of the process, but the only people that know the process are some staff and developers. And I think that that puts an inappropriate imbalance in that conversation. How do you think our city will, could, should respond?
Mayor, council members, if I may jump in here, that is our goal, and that's something that came out of the Housing Task Force, is kind of a layman's terms, right?
Yeah.
Is to understand this, a 1-2 page thing that can be on our website, that can be understand, that we can engage. So we're doing the legal side of it right now. We'll put this into a more layman's term. We'll have the ordinance, we'll have that document on our website. We can have them available, at the front counter should anyone want them. And I will just add that we do regularly, the planning department, community development department meets with those residents who may have a smaller project or who may have questions on larger projects, to inform them of what's going on, when they can get engaged, et cetera. We may not do publicize that regularly, but we are certainly always here and willing to meet with anyone who wants to meet with us. Thank you.
Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Just one quick clarification. State law in almost every case really only requires 10 days published notice. It's only in those situations where they're rezoning property of 5 acres or less that the 350-foot mailed notice is required. Now, plenty of communities do impose upon themselves a higher notice requirement than that, and that mailed notice goes out uniformly for any hearing or maybe further distance. So, I mean, that is your point. But I just want to make it clear that to the extent you're already providing 350 for all of these, you're already over and above what state law requires in most instances. So it's just a question of how much more do you want to go.
So it's only slightly less inadequate than what I had asserted.
I just wanted to be clear.
Fine, fair enough.
You know, on that note, I'll just add that in subdivision 6, it says city manager is authorized to deviate from any neighborhood meeting requirements. So I'm confident that Ms. Crawford, if it's the will of this council to extend that, she will. And I don't disagree. 350 feet for a large project is not nearly enough. And it's sort of hard to memorialize it in an ordinance, but you kind of know it when you see it. Schaefer Richardson, the Barnum, those are big projects. A guy that's a stone's throw away, you probably need to go a little bit further than that. But the smaller projects, I think Mr. Lindahl and the rest of the city staff probably has a feel for that as well. So I think there is flexibility in there, and I'll just throw my 2 cents in. Again, I agree with you. 350 feet is not nearly enough for those big projects that are pretty self-evident that we need a much broader notice. So I think there's flexibility built into that, but your point is well taken.
Mayor, members of the council, just a couple questions.
Go.
Okay. Just a couple of comments related to the questions that have been raised here. I would note for you that in subdivision 4 that talks about notice and invitation, middle of the paragraph, sentence reads, the area of notification may be modified by the city staff based on specific projects. So that clause is included to allow for, and I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this in my previous comments, to allow for not only the irregular shape that 350 feet may offer, you know, just in a geographic sense on a map, but also to allow for city staff to recognize larger projects that are more significant in the community and require greater notice. And certainly we've heard, staff has heard, at least I've heard from starting here, that more engagement, we're looking for more and more effective engagement with our residents on development proposals as they come through. We should be using our website. We should be using social media. The electronic means that more of the public is tied into now as opposed to just what they may get in a mailing to their own home. So we're looking at all of those options as part of the best practice that staff uses going forward. And then I would just add, as we look at the kind of the next steps for the city to look at as far as our zoning processes go, I would agree that coming in here as a new set of eyes, we have a zoning ordinance that has a fairly arduous kind of process to it that can be more easily understood by developers, but large person. And so the next item, as you might have seen at the beginning of our memo, after this is to talk about updating the zoning code. And there will be an extensive conversation during that process, I assure you, about how we make our processes more streamlined, more clear, more effective, and balancing the land use rights of individuals and the public interest of the community.
Okay. Councilmember Walsh, did you have comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to add to the chorus of I agree the 350 sounds really small, and so as you're using that discretion, you know, one more voice. I mean, the phrase over-communicate comes to my mind. I've used that in my career a lot. It's always better to over-communicate. And, you know, it's a few more few more stamps, you know, in the budget, a little bit more wider net to cast, I would add my voice to that for sure. And there's another idea as you're talking about communicating. We're gonna talk, I think, about the newspaper, the local newspapers soon. I mean, that's an avenue we haven't used as much. I think there's a rotating column in there from leaders in the community that maybe we could get our turn at that. Maybe it's the mayor, maybe it's the city manager. After this is kind of done, like you say, get the ordinance in place, and then that layman's explanation would be a good commentary in that little spot in the newspaper that everybody reads. So.
Very good. Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm gratified that there's agreement that my assertions are not completely without some basis. Without in any way insinuating bad faith, having permissive language depends on who is exercising their judgment. And after this meeting is over and the minutes are filed, nobody will ever go back and read. Okay, some of us have shorter memories, maybe, but it's like once our existing staff move on, what assurance do we have that the sentiments of this council are actually embodied in whoever is exercising that discretion in the future? And I flag that not to suggest that there is ill intent, but I'm skeptical that it persists, and that its beauty is always in the eye of the beholder, and that beholder is not always a resident. So we may not choose to do anything formally. I appreciate that there is language for discretion. I don't think that that's quite enough, but I'll leave it there for me.
Councilmember Hughes.
I guess I thought the entire purpose of this system was to ensure that we got community feedback before a developer came in and created a concept, and then neighborhoods hated it, and all of their time and expense was thrown to the side, and people were angry, and we were hearing from people. So the entire purpose of this non-concept is to avoid exactly what you're talking about. And so it seems like, simply by definition, if we don't get the information out there wide enough, then it will have failed anyway, and we'll see that. Like the incentive to actually go out and create a wide net is what created this. I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying I think the entire purpose of this is to make sure that we don't get yelled at anymore. Which I'm looking forward to. But I guess so. I'm not as worried about it on that side, because it's like we're just going to have to come up and change it if this didn't solve the problem.
Yeah, and to echo that, I agree, that was the whole point of this, right? It was so that we could air something out early, so that we didn't have something that was actually an official vote before the council for the first time, that the public had any notice of it. I think having, regardless of whether it's 300 feet, 350 feet, 500 feet, 2 miles, the whole city, my experience shows that when people dislike a project, they're more likely to come out. So if you have any neighborhood meeting, even if it's only 350 feet, the word's going to get out, and the folks on the dais will be contacted, city staff will be contacted, and that's really the touch point that we're looking for. Is there significant opposition to this? And if so, okay, let's figure that out early. And if there isn't significant opposition, whether it's 350 feet or 500 feet, then it's probably green lights, and it falls to us as policymakers to decide whether or not it's best for the city. So, I understand both points. Councilmember Edberg, I agree. I guess I diverge a little bit in that I do currently trust city staff to know when we should modify and deviate from that, and then going forward, by virtue of just having this instrument in place, I don't think we need to codify anything in writing beyond the 350 feet. We can agree to disagree, but I don't see any need to modify this, other than striking the Park Advisory Commission language from that. So, are there any other comments on this?
Need a motion to approve?
We need a motion to approve the resolution before us, but striking the Park Advisory Commission language.
You'll adopt the ordinance first, then the resolution.
Right, but the ordinance is what needs to be modified.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I got that. Thank you. So I need a motion to approve the ordinance, again, with that language struck.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ordinance is adopted. The second item of business that we have is the resolution that is before us. I would entertain a motion to approve that resolution.
So moved. Oh, go ahead.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. The resolution passes. Okay. Moving on to item 8, new business. Item A, the 2023 annual appointments. There's a lot on the agenda on this one. Ms. Crawford.
Mayor, members of the council, tonight, every year, the city council adopts annual appointments at their first meeting for various areas of government, the annual newspaper, city attorney, prosecuting attorney, and the administrative hearing officer. So in your staff report, we have all of those. We can take them one by one. We can take it however you'd like. So in your staff report, we have the organizations listed with the 2022 representative, 2022 alternate representative for Ramsey County League of Local Governments, VLAMO, Ramsey County Dispatch Policy Committee, NYFS, and Metro Purple Line Corridor Management Committee. There are descriptions of those organizations within the staff report that I'll trust that you all have read. When it comes to appointment of the city attorneys, the city charter assigns the city council that responsibility of annually appointing city attorneys. We do have a proposal from GDO Law as well as Kennedy and Graven, who are our current attorney firms. Staff does recommend reappointment of both of them. For 2023 contract costs for GDO, we're looking at a yearly contract of $136,000, which is a decrease from the 2020 to 2022 contract costs. And hourly rate for vehicle forfeitures is slightly increased to $115 per hour. When it comes to the counselor, Kennedy and Graven, 2023 contract costs, these are based on kind of our actual costs over the past few years. We're looking at a monthly retainer of $3,634 a month, an hourly rate of $178, and a developer reimbursed rate of $221 per hour. And in your staff report, we show annual costs for legal services over the past 4 years. I don't quite have all of 2022 closed out yet. So for 2021, the total cost for prosecution and the counselor was $231,060. It is slightly increasing each year. When we move to the administrative hearing officer, since May 2019, Jim Rathburn, who's a long-term White Bear Lake resident with a law degree, has work experience related to this. He was appointed as our city's hearing officer. I do recommend that you reappoint Mr. Rathburn at a 3% increase for an hourly rate of $36.05. He mainly works with the police department, more so on a regular basis. And then, a 3% increase for an hourly rate of $37.13. I apologize. And then when it comes to the designation of the official newspaper, the White Bear Press has expressed interest in continuing to serve as our official newspaper for the city. They are the only newspaper that did submit a bid to staff for this, which is in your packet. And for 2023, we are looking at a 4% increase to $22.32. So staff can stand for questions. I know that White Bear Press is here should they wish to speak at all. So I'll take it from there.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. So why don't we do this? We've got a resolution before us that adopts the full slate as recommended by staff. And in years past, these have been individual line items. So what I'd like to do is we've got really 5 different categories, and let's just discuss each of them point by point. We'll start with the appointment of city representatives to various organizations. On page 1 of the memorandum before the council, we've got a slate of various council members that served in that capacity last year. I know Ms. Crawford has reached out to the council, and we haven't heard anyone that wants to change from last year, so we'll start with that position. Is anybody looking to deviate from what they served on last year? Seeing none, so there'd be no objections to continuing with the appointments as they were in 2022. That's good. All right, so the second portion of this is with regard to Kennedy and Graven. Mr. Gilchrist is here. Does anyone have any objections or comments or anything they want to discuss with regard to our city attorney appointment?
Well, I wonder if Mr. Gilchrist would yield to some questions. I got him over here.
A long list. You're in the hot seat. We're gonna depose our city attorney.
I'm kidding. All good.
Anyone? So nobody wants to fire Troy? We're good with Troy?
No.
Keep him going? Okay.
I don't know, is there any way we could possibly make his life miserable for at least 5 minutes? Just, down payment on a year's worth.
I think
Look at the hourly rate. The 5 minutes is going to cost us $36.52. Let's just move on.
I think he's earned his fee in the last year, and we've thrown a couple big issues his way. All right, so we're good with that.
Billable hours.
I want to make a comment on GDO and our city prosecutor. Ms. Crawford and I met with them a few months ago with regard to some research that we had conducted with what other cities were paying. We presented that to GDO and said, hey, we got to get the rates down a little bit. We think we're not quite in line. And to GDO's credit, they were gracious enough to give us a proposal that I think is more than fair and brings us in line with what other cities are paying. It's a significant reduction in what they were paying. In addition to that, they are ready, willing, and able to sign a 3-year agreement holding that rate steady. We can't do that at present because our city charter requires us to appoint our city attorney and prosecutor on an annual basis. I'm told that that issue is before the Charter Commission to give us some leeway so that we can at least have the flexibility to enter into longer-term agreements that I think are more financially advantageous to the city. So that is in the works, but I did want to note that that GDO was very flexible with us on their fee in light of it being brought to their attention. And I hear nothing but positive feedback, and we've been working with GDO along with Mr. Gilchrist on the moratorium on THC, and I don't hear any complaints. So is there anyone that has any issues or reservations with moving forward with GDO? Seeing none. I'm sorry, Councilmember Edberg.
So I will support the staff's recommendation. I'd appreciate hearing any perceptions on their work on our behalf in court. But I also want to note that a year ago, within the past year, we've had 2 separate occasions where associates in the firm have come into our conversation, and that's unusual in my experience. And I'll just ask, have those kinds of conversations been assessed? And
Good question.
are we prepared to enter into another extension of the agreement?
Mayor, Councilmember Edberg, our contract states that they are to provide an annual update to the city council. So we did, I don't know if we began that last year, but we did implement that for last year. They have also been giving me a quarterly update that I've relayed to the council members via email periodically. They are prepared to continue to do that as per the contract.
Okay.
All right. Our city hearing officer, Mr. Rathburn. Anybody have any issues with that? I think that's a kind of a quiet position. That's a good thing. But I haven't heard any issues with that. And then lastly, with regard to our official newspaper, the White Bear Press, Mr. Johnson is here in the audience, and I want to invite him now forward if he'd like to say a few words before the council. Please step up. That's a good question, possibly. I don't know how old that relic is and whether it works, but we can use our imaginations if need be.
Mayor, council, staff, I'm Carter Johnson, publisher of Press Publications. We're a local newspaper here with more than 125 years of service in the community. We're delighted to serve this great area, especially this unique downtown marketplace where we help promote and highlight events and other activities around. Our office is made up of a staff of roughly 24 to 32 employees, and then we have nearly 100 contractors. And those contractors are our youth carriers and some contract writers. So I'm delighted to share with you that we've had some subscriber comments come back. I especially like the local ads from the businesses and the local sports coverage. We had a comment from, I always enjoy the press in my driveway on Thursday. The challenge with that, my driveway on Thursday, could we go to the next page, is that possible? Our goal is to be your best source of community information. Next page, thank you. And here's some of the comments from our subscribers. The challenge with the paper in the driveway on Thursday is it's due out by 7 on Wednesday. So we're working on that. Many of these youth carriers are, it's a first-time job. We've highlighted some of our youth carriers when we get a call or they have good comments on their, from the residents. We try to do a carrier of the month. If you're aware, Warren Buffett got his first job start as a newspaper carrier, Wayne Gretzky and Gene Simmons. Some comments from advertisers. We're an affordable, effective way to reach a large audience in print and online. But we've had a really great response. This year, our association did a survey. 86% of Minnesotans read newspapers online and in print. And with the election that we just went through, 8 out of 10 newspaper readers vote in an election. So it bodes well for our city and our the election process. Something new at Press, we've started an arts in the community. We've had an arts and culture page, and we're very thankful for some of these newer pages that we've added. What I'm excited about is our audience, weekly audience, is 69,289. So that's both the White Bear Press, Vadnais Heights, and our print and digital. And then just our contact information. But we're delighted to serve you. I apologize that last year I didn't make it to this council meeting. I have a number that I travel to. And if there's any questions or.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. We appreciate you being here and sharing some thoughts with the council.
Thank you.
So, we have a resolution before us that codifies what we just discussed. Councilmember Jones.
I do have a comment on, thank you to Mr. Johnson for being here this evening. It was appreciated. Also would like to thank Mr. Paulson for being here and appreciate what you're doing. And I might just want to say thanks to Ms. Newkins. I'm going to miss Deb. And I really wanted to take that time to say thanks for finally letting her retire, Carter. It's about time. I'm kidding. I know. Please, but it's like, no offense to Mr. Paulson, I appreciate your exuberance. It really is. So, but thank you, Mr. Johnson, for being here tonight.
Very good. I would entertain a motion to adopt the resolution before us. Second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The resolution passes. Moving on to item 8B, establishing the White Bear Lake Council meetings for the year. Ms. Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. In accordance with our city charter, at its first regular meeting in January, the council shall set the dates of its regular monthly meetings for the year. Regular meetings are the second and fourth Tuesday of each month, except those months where the second Tuesday is required for election purposes, in which case we move the meeting, we push it forward by one day. In following a past practice, there is only one meeting scheduled for December in 2023. Our meetings begin at 7 p.m. and adjourn by 10:30 p.m. unless authorized by the majority of the city council to extend. Work sessions typically begin at 6 p.m. and are tentatively scheduled for the third Tuesday of every month, with the exception of December. We have used those work sessions periodically, and they will be canceled if we don't have anything to discuss that month, but we do just put a placeholder on the calendar for that third Tuesday. And then included in your packet is a public meeting calendar showcasing all of the public meetings for the city council and city boards and commissions that I am also requesting that you adopt via the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. This was pulled from the agenda, I guess, just as an opportunity to discuss at least kind of where my head is and where Ms. Crawford's head is. We had a lot of work sessions in the last year. We also had a lot of big issues that, knock on wood, aren't going to be present this year, like the Rush Line, Purple Line, the public safety building, and the sale of the armory. So we're optimistic that we're not going to actually have to exercise use of every third Thursday for the, or is it Tuesday? Which one do we have?
Tuesdays.
The third Tuesday of every month, and we'll try to provide as much notice if and when we are going to cancel that. I do want to suggest to the council, because we did this quite a few times this last year, is have a council or have a work session following a council meeting. I'll note that our council meetings have been pretty brisk, and that's a good thing. So I'm all for, if the council wants to, if we do need to have a work session, try and do it after a council meeting, so that we're only tying up one night. But I at least want to air that out for the council to see if people are open to that. Who likes that idea, good, bad, or otherwise? Councilmember Jones likes it. Thanks, Strand.
I think it depends on, I mean, if we're
Yeah,
going
I
to
mean, it
talk
can
for
be-
a half hour and that's all
Yeah.
you want, then I'm all for it, but I don't want to get into a budget meeting for 3 hours.
Sure, I mean,
Coming here.
we've got kind of our mainstays of 3 or 4 meetings that are budget meetings that aren't going to change. But if we have something that we would otherwise need to meet for half an hour, why schedule a whole nother night in the calendar? We can do it after a council meeting. Councilmember Jones.
If it's, I fear saying this, like I'm going to jinx us, but if we anticipate a shorter agenda and you do your best between staff to put that together, I agree with Heidi, but I'm okay on those nights. I mean, we spent nights till 10:30 or longer a lot previously, and that has been shortened. Thank you to staff and you and previous staff and previous you. You referring to city manager? That has tightened up greatly and appreciated. What I do not like the meetings beforehand. Can't stand them. I don't care if they're a short hit subject. It always feels like we're pressed for time and we're running up against, coming up here at 7 o'clock. I can't stand it. But I have no problems with after meetings going till 10 and saying, okay, we're done at 10. But I also agree with Councilmember Hughes. Bigger topics move them off.
Very good. Yeah, and I'm not suggesting we amend the resolution. We can adopt it as is,
would
but just informally, we can communicate and try and work with each other on schedule. Redbird.
Mr. Mayor, so I support the idea of setting aside time in an intentional way for work study. Our past history is that we really, we've scheduled 11 in this calendar, and we really typically only use 4, 5, maybe 6 in a big year. So we're going to be canceling a bunch of them. My personal request is that we cancel them more than a couple of weeks in advance. Tying them up has an impact on our other professional lives. And so giving us the full access to using 11 weeks a year for the rest of our lives would be highly valuable to me. And so whatever that we can do to make those as useful would be highly welcomed and appreciated.
Sure. I will note that I did have Ms. Crawford pull how many work sessions were done in previous years, and we were kind of on par. They're usually 10, 11, 12. There was a 13 in there, so we're close. Because that was a point of personal pride for me. I want to at least carry on tradition and make sure that we're not unnecessarily meeting if that wasn't the past practice. So I hear all your points. I think we'll be more efficient this year, but we're really not too far off pace what historically has been done the last handful of years.
Mr. Mayor, if we're going to have a bunch of meetings that go till 10 o'clock, I think we're going to need like a snack schedule. I can take
Sure.
February, you know.
Well, yeah.
Have some juice boxes.
Bill will bring the gummy bears, we know
Gummy
that.
bears, juice boxes, you know, I'm just saying.
We're going to
Fair
go
enough.
with cheese puffs and those peanuts, circus peanuts.
Orange slices.
Fair enough.
Find a little pizza and ice cream shop not too far from here.
There is indeed. There is indeed. All right, with that, I would entertain a motion to adopt the resolution. The motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The resolution carries, passes. Item 9, discussion, we have nothing scheduled. Item 10, communications from the city manager. Ms. Crawford, do you have anything tonight?
I do not have anything tonight. Welcome to 2023, another great year.
Yeah. I will note that at the next council meeting, we will have a closed session where we will be discussing Ms. Crawford's annual performance evaluation. I trust that you all saw them in your inboxes earlier this week or yesterday. We have a little bit new format this time around. If anybody has any concerns about that or questions, please reach out to me. But I think this will be a better evaluative process than we've used in the past. So I'm looking forward to your feedback, which is due to Mr. Juba by the 19th. Thank you. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
We have another meeting?
We have a housing meeting?
Of White Bear Lake meeting to order at 8:06 p.m. Please note that Mr. Edberg is being fussy. All right, call to order, roll call.
Member Walsh. Here. Member Hughes. Here. Member Jones.
Here.
Member Edberg. Here. And Member Engstrand.
Here. Thank you. All right, authority, I need an approval for the minutes, please.
Second.
Discussion. With that, may I hear all those approving, say yes.
Not so easy, is
Sorry.
it?
All right, we need to have an adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Second. Second, any discussion? All those looking for approval, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we have an agenda. Our agenda is election of the chair and vice chair of the HRA. With that, I will take nominations for chair.
I nominate member, HRA member Jones.
It was a tough year last year. Those 2 meetings were really something else. I don't know if I can handle
Making my
it.
recommendation based on your performance.
All right, so I will accept that nomination. Do I have any other nominations for chair of the HRA? Going once, going twice. Close. With that said, Councilmember Jones being nominated for chair. All those in, well, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. 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 All those against? There we go. And we need a vice chair, and so I will ask for nominations for vice chair.
Mr. Chair, based on proximity to the gavel, I nominate Edberg for vice chair.
Gavel might wind up hitting me. Mr. Edberg has been nominated. Is there any other nominations? All right, all those in favor, no discussion. All those in favor of Mr. Edberg being vice chair of the HRA, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Against? We have a chair and a vice chair. With that,
To adjourn.
we are adjourned. And we're out.
Just slightly. Yeah, and actually that was something that I spent